Hello, and a very warm welcome, everyone, to this, what promises to be a very exciting webinar, part of a series focusing on the NHS long-term plan, which was published what seems like a generation ago now, pre-COVID in 2019. So thank you for taking precious time out of your diaries to attend, but you've made a great decision as you are genuinely in for a real treat. We have an amazing multidisciplinary array of expert guests giving their individual perspective on how to address the unmet need and burden within the NHS, with an underlying theme of digital enablement, very topical at the moment within the NHS. Sadly, Professor Partha Carr, due to personal reasons, had to pull out of today's faculty, and I'm sure we all wish him the very best. But I still think we have a tremendous faculty that's going to add a lot of value to our everyday clinical practice. We have fantastic expertise actually spanning the academic fields of diabetes and cardiology, as well as insight from a technology company, Fitbit, who are right at the forefront of making digital enablement to enhance healthy living very much mainstream. And I think they've completely transcended this space. And I'm Yasser Javed, a GP with a specialist interest in cardiology, and your chair for today. So that NHS long-term plan that I mentioned at the outset, it placed a huge focus on the prevention of cardiovascular disease, which is by far and away the single leading cause of death for our patients in this country. And that was true pre-COVID, during the pandemic, and will likely be for many generations to come, as we now hopefully transition into some sort of post-COVID era. And in my opinion, metabolic disease in the form of type 2 diabetes and obesity, or diabesity is the phrase that's been coined, I think that's the original pandemic of the 21st century and is one of the great drivers for cardiovascular disease. Quite simply, there is so much diabetes in cardiovascular disease and so much cardiovascular disease in diabetes. The two are intrinsically linked and often a lethal cocktail for our patients. Which makes cardiovascular disease also one of the leading causes of premature and preventable mortality, but also morbidity and disability. I mean, it's a sad fact that so many of our patients lose many good quality of life years to cardiovascular disease, and we have to try and find innovative solutions to try and claw back those lost quality of life years. And I think one of the very few good things to come out of the COVID era has been this hugely increased appetite to adopt innovation in healthcare. And that's innovation in terms of new ways of working, new technology, as well as patient pathways, and also this renewed ethos making every contact count. A healthy lifestyle is the foundation of any cardiometabolic prevention strategy and goes well beyond the key parameters of healthy eating, exercise, and probably smoking cessation. I think we're becoming increasingly aware, and our experts will demonstrate the evidence of how sleep and stress, for instance, in addition to activity and nutrition, can impact that cardiometabolic trajectory. We'll also crucially explore how digital wearable technology like Fitbit, and I'm a very big fan myself, can empower patients to make these important changes and also now provide remote diagnostic solutions. I mean, I used my Fitbit Sense over the weekend to screen my whole family for atrial fibrillation, and I am more than satisfied with the quality of the ECG trace that can be PDF to any email address that you want. And I think these type of remote diagnostics can help reduce the burden within both primary and secondary care and ultimately make a significant dent in this huge burden of cardiovascular disease, which comes at enormous associated costs, not just to the NHS, but also social care, and of course, most importantly, catastrophic, often tragic and premature human cost. So we want to get the very best out of our experts today. So please, I would very strongly encourage you to use liberal use of the chat to post questions, leave comments, challenges. I think our experts are really up for a challenge. And please, if you want, you can even leave any controversial comments. We're here to address all of these and have hopefully a great discussion. So it now gives me a great pleasure to introduce Aideen O'Colmain to kick off our discussions today. Aideen is Business Director of Fitbit Health Solutions. Fitbit, we all know, it's a company that we don't need an introduction to. It's synonymous with trying to make the world healthier. And right at the core of its behavior change model are the 4 key health and wellness pillars: activity, sleep, stress, and nutrition. Its technology cleverly uses nudges and reward to prompt action and change. And Fitbit really are passionate about supporting research into improving outcomes within cardiometabolic disease. Specifically within diabetes, they have a collaboration with Solera and Health2 Sync, facilitating optimized diabetes prevention and management. And they've also developed a very strong partnership with Diabetes UK. And within cardiovascular disease, they fostered an initiative called Our Hearts, Our Minds, which Susan, our cardiology expert, has first-hand experience of and will hopefully throw some light on. And what excites me the most about Fitbit is its partnership with Connected Life to deliver this cost-efficient, streamlined remote patient monitoring solution. And if you don't mind, Aideen, I think what I would like to say is what differentiates Fitbit from its competition, or what mostly differentiates it from its competition, is this very broad range of devices that can really be tailored to suit individual needs. So welcome, Aideen, and I very much look forward to hearing your perspective.
Thanks, Doctor. Well, you can see here we're talking about enabling positive behaviour change, because we really do believe that that can help reduce the burden on the NHS by really working on preventive techniques for people. Sorry, next slide is there. It's very much in line with our mission. As you mentioned, our mission is to make everyone in the world healthier. This is something that we've been true to since we began over 10 years ago. Our founders are still involved in the business, and it is the mission that we look to anytime we're making decisions in developing the ecosystem, to just make sure that we stay true to that. As I said, we started, well, 2009, it's more than 10 years, 11, 12 years ago. And we really were synonymous with creating the wearable category, looking very much at steps and sleep at that stage. Things have moved on a lot in the sensor community. They've developed some wonderful sensors, but again, using our mission as our guide, we look at what's going to contribute to making the world healthier. So we carefully curate the sensors, the algorithms, and anything else that we add to our ecosystem to ensure that we remain true to that goal. So currently you'll see that we're up now with, as you mentioned, our ECG. We've got various heart rate notifications and a health metrics dashboard that allows people to look at the last 30 days and help use that, say, with a doctor's appointment, or just to observe themselves if they so wish. The way we do this is we really just focus down on 4 foundational behaviors. So they'd be around activity, sleep, nutrition, and stress. I think we all know it, but it has been proven that if you get more sleep, you make better choices. If you have more activity, you get better sleep. So I think by working on any one of those factors, whatever factor you find easiest to work on, you naturally start improving on the others. And we support that change with a number of behavior loops. There's sort of the short behavior loop where we might encourage somebody to move every hour. And then there's that longer reflective loop that just helps people to see that, they did walk a little bit further yesterday, they had a slightly better sleep today. So it helps immediately give people links between what they've done, what the impact is, and so encourage them to keep going, or to fire them up for the next day, give a bit of motivation. Because I think sometimes when you're told you have to change your habits, it all just sounds very difficult and huge and earth-shattering, whereas this just helps you understand the little changes, what difference that makes, and so encourages you to keep on going. Now we do this through, as you mentioned, we have a range of devices. The advantage of the range of devices is that there really is one to suit everybody, every patient, every condition. So you've got the entry level, where you're still measuring your heart rate, your steps, your sleep. You're getting a whole wealth of information, and you can also use a premium service, which will give you even more insight and guidance to help. These also pair with a weighing scales. So all this information can go seamlessly into the app. They all use the same app, so it's easy to progress as well through the range. And it also, all of them have good battery life. So it means that people aren't having to take the device off and recharge it. They're getting 6-7 days battery time. So they don't tend to take the device off, and they become quite used to it. And it's an award winner, as you can see there. We've won a number of awards, so we're very proud of our devices. And as I said, they're well priced and they're very usable. They're very comfortable to wear as well. So people will wear them for sleep, which again is a very important factor when you're trying to change your behaviors. In terms of, sorry, I should also say that there are a number of data points that we do make available on APIs. So researchers are always welcome to use them, as are other companies that are trying to do something towards health. As you mentioned, Connected Life. This is one company that does something very exciting with the API, with the data from a Fitbit. They found that they can get most of the information they need from the Fitbit, and it saves a patient maybe having to look after 4 or 5 different devices. So they use the same interface as with Fitbit, same login credentials, and they then can add in layers such as, you know, how comfortable a person is, if they're having any difficulty, and reminding them to take medication. Using the sense, they have a clock face, so you can create your own clock faces to further encourage people, or to take in information that then feeds into the app. Then that patient side feeds into a clinician view. Now the clinician view, you can make this fit what you need it to do for you. So you don't necessarily have to take mountains and mountains of information. It'll take in the information and then allow you to see the information that's relevant to you, and to set up alerts or warnings if there's something that you want to really be aware of. The added advantage is that as you go through a care regime, that you can add other medics or clinicians to the profile. So it allows that seamlessness of information. Nothing gets lost along the way. So generally, we do tend to focus down on the cardiometabolic conditions, as you mentioned, Jazzer. People are looking at those at the moment. And in particular, we're looking at diabetes and heart health. The reason for that is obviously they do cause substantial problems around the world. They're #1 killer. And also we do know from research and generally that their prevalence and impact can be changed by taking preventative measures, by behavior change. So one of the things that we believe is that if we raise awareness of these diseases, then people know what kind of actions they need to take, or have a better sense. But you need to know that you just need to be aware of these, and you need to be aware of the fact that it is possible to have some kind of a change, or to delay some of the onset of these conditions. One of the partnerships that it's a recent partnership with Diabetes UK that we're really proud of, because it's very much about raising awareness of diabetes and of people's prevalence to get diabetes. So we, in the first few weeks that we are, of course, sponsoring or, supporting a number of their events, because that's how they raise money to do their research. They are the #1 investor in diabetes research, I believe, in the UK. But as I said, what we're very proud of is the impact we've had on the Know Your Risk tool. In the first few weeks that we announced the partnership, we had over 2/3 of the traffic to the Diabetes UK site was from Fitbit users. And they had 27,000 people in addition to normal accessed the tool. Now, the interesting thing out of that is, as I say here, 44% of those were at a moderate to high risk. So that's really important. Those are people that may not have even thought about diabetes until it was, you know, they were at a stage where it was just much more of a burden to them and to the NHS, of course. So we're very proud of that one. And we know that we can, so we've raised awareness, and we know that using Fitbit in a program can absolutely help somebody to reach their goals. This is a good observational study from the US. It's the Solera partnership, but they're a very well established diabetes prevention program offerer, if you like. And they had a program whereby they offered their patients, their customers, coaching service, the standard service, and a Fitbit. And they obviously the goal of everybody was to lose the famous 5% of their body fat to try to prevent the onset of their type 2 diabetes or delay it. So what they found was when they tracked all of those different groupings, that actually the customers with coaching and those with Fitbit achieved their goal reasonably, or a higher percentage of them achieved their goal tended to be a shorter period of time. But the really key thing was that the once the coaches were removed, once the program was removed, many of the others had sort of their effect died off. Whereas with the Fitbit, people managed to maintain their weight loss gains. So they stayed in a positive area for a much longer period of time. And we've continued to observe them, and the trend is continuing. They're still staying within the healthy zone, as it were. So that's something that was really, really positive and is a very simple way of people to deal with their risk. This is another one from Japan and Taiwan. It's a clinical study this time, and they are extending this study now because they found they had such positive results on, or a positive effect on people with pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes. Oops. So then on the cardiovascular space, I would say on the diabetes space, there are a number of clinical trials, observational trials going on across the world. And we have one or two that are launching in the UK. So hopefully next time we'll be able to talk to those a little bit more. On the cardiovascular space, I would say that I'll just quickly show you this because I think I'm over time. On the cardiovascular space, I'll just mention the BMS Pfizer study that we did, and this led to the ECG product that Yasser mentioned earlier on the Sense. So it's gone through full approval. It's FDA approved, CE approved, and it has been through a whole study period. And I've on the offer site, I think people should be able to download the study, and also you can download the or access the Know Your Risk tool. I think that should be on the offer site there as well, so you can try that out. Do yourself some good today. So over to you, Yasser. You're on mute.
So sorry for that schoolboy error. No, thank you very much, Aideen, for that wonderful overview of really the broad range of services that your technology can offer, and really help streamline our work in both primary and secondary care. For me, Fitbit is just so much more than just an activity tracker. It seems to me the activity tracking functionality is almost a bonus on top of all the other wonderful things it can offer. And I love the collaboration and the evidence you're now gathering from strong sort of partnerships within the healthcare sort of sectors. We had a question, actually, I'm trying to find it, from Peter. It's quite a specific one, but maybe I could just quickly address it to you, Aideen, whether you've looked at whether Fitbit technology could help monitor epileptic episodes. Having a device which is a mobile phone and fall detector in one small key fob, but combining the two would be fantastic. I mean, are you constantly trying to evolve your technology to see what other sort of avenues you can explore? You're on mute now, Aideen.
Am I still on mute? Yeah.
No, we can hear you.
No, definitely. As I said, we constantly look at the sensors that are available, look at the need that's out there, and see how well we can contribute to helping that. So yes, epilepsy is something that I think actually if you go onto our website, you'll see a research. There's an area where there's peer-reviewed research, and I believe there's one or two there related to epilepsy. It's not something that we target, if you like, but it is something that I have heard before, that the sleep element has been really useful, as well as. Well,
to me, it just makes perfect sense. What an exciting thing that would be if you could integrate it for that purpose. Are Fitbits recommended, Aideen? Do you recommend it to children and adolescents? We've had a comment from Alison. They're not usually allowed to be worn at school. Is that right? We're not...
Some schools apparently do stop them if there's any communication piece on. There was difficulty around mobile phones at one point, so some schools stopped. I thought that had been changed, but I don't have.
That's a bit harsh, isn't it?
So I've maybe missed out on that one. But they are available for children. There's an ACE one that specifically, which even has a Minions version, so it's very popular with children. And then adolescents tend to go for the Inspire, but it's good because there's challenges in there. They can do games with each other, activity games, so it can be great for a child that needs more movement.
And I'm probably a bit biased, but I'm very much taken by that ECG technology. As a lot of the audience probably know, it's been an area of particular interest of mine, AF and stroke prevention for a number of years. We had a comment that in the US, ECG screening is not routinely recommended for the general population. But I think that's almost missing the point, because we're not saying to screen everyone at any time with the general population. But I think if you've got someone with risk factors, someone with symptoms, maybe an elderly patient with diabetes or hypertension, I mean, these are patients at pretty high risk. And I don't see any harm in recommending a bit of intermittent targeted opportunistic screening in those patients, especially when we know, Aideen, 50% of patients who have a stroke due to AF, the stroke was that first presentation of atrial fibrillation, and it's just such an opportunity that's potentially missed if we don't look at targeted screening of these high-risk patients. I don't. What's your take on that?
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I think it's definitely an area that it's so simple to do. It doesn't cost anything. It's just it's a very easy, quick way of just maybe identifying something that's that can cause you so much more trouble later on.
And I see a lot of ECGs in my clinical practice. I can tell you the quality is, as with any ECG, it's very much dependent on the quality of the trace in terms of whether it's diagnostic or not. But I was very happy with the quality that was being churned out from my Fitbit sense. So thanks, Aideen, for that. I think just in the interest of time, we better move on to Susan. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Dr. Susan Connolly. Hopefully your sort of IT issues have sort of been sorted out. Susan, I know, is an innovative consultant cardiologist. She probably doesn't know this, but I've actually heard her speak on a couple of occasions. Very, very impactful. She champions the importance of lifestyle interventions in her patients. She's not a cardiologist that just believes in sticking stents in patients. This is holistic lifestyle interventions to improve outcomes. And I very much look forward, actually, Susan, to hearing about how you've sort of successfully implemented that Our Hearts, Our Minds initiative that Aideen talked about, which has integrated Fitbit technology to really enhance patient outcomes. So welcome, Susan, and look forward to hearing what you've got to say. Have we... See, I gave her the... I jinxed it, didn't I? by mentioning... look, we'll try our very best to get Susan back, but you know we've got a very large faculty, so we've got another colleague. We'll probably leave Susan to the end.
There she is.
Back.
Oh, she's back. She's back.
I'm so sorry about that.
No, that's fine. With the wonders of technology, you're back. So I gave you a pretty good introduction. I hope you heard most of that. So over to you, Susan.
Thank you very much, Yasser. So I'm going to talk about how we used digital innovation in Northern Ireland to promote cardiovascular health. Can somebody move my slides on for me? So this is one of my favorite papers. This is from the EPIC prospective cohort study, and this stratified patients by how many healthy lifestyle factors they had. And I think the first thing to note is that the majority of us are leading on healthy lifestyles, and only 1 in 10 had optimally healthy lifestyles. That's not smoking, healthy BMI, healthy diet, and physically active. And no matter what your lifestyle score was, the worse your lifestyle score, the higher your incidence of stroke, heart attack, and cancer and diabetes, because the same risk factors underpin all these chronic disease. Next slide. The story in cardiology, however, is utterly depressing. The Eurospire surveys were carried out by the academic team I worked with in Imperial. These have been going on 25 years, 5 surveys in total, and the story doesn't change. These are cardiovascular patients after a cardiac event. The smoking prevalence is unchanged. The amount of obesity is increasing. Most are physically inactive, and most have uncontrolled cardiovascular risk factors. So despite all our innovations of the past 25 years, our secondary prevention standards are still dismal. Next slide, please. So when I went to work in Imperial College, we ran a study in Europe called EuroAction, which was a nurse-led multidisciplinary program that aimed to produce better lifestyle and risk factor control in everyday clinical practice. We published this in the Lancet 13 years ago. We ran this as a program in London and achieved very good results. And next slide, please. And then when I moved to Northern Ireland in 2017, I achieved funding to set it up in Northern Ireland, delivered across 3 sites in Derry, Omagh and Enniskillen, population 300,000. And the structure of the programme was this very detailed initial assessment by a nurse, a dietitian and a physical activity specialist. And then 1 year to the day, our 1-year birthday, all my team were taken away and redeployed to the front line with the first COVID wave. So I got them back 6 weeks later, and this was very much a face-to-face programme. Initial assessment in person with 3 members of the MDT, and then supervised exercise sessions in a gym. And I realized unless we flexed very, very quickly, we were literally dead in the water. Next slide. So within 6 weeks, we moved the whole program virtually. So we now offer the patients their initial assessment via video or telephone. You can see our dietitian there on the right, showing a patient how to measure their waist circumference. We sent them equipment kits in the post with tape measures, blood pressure monitors and Fitbits if they chose to take a Fitbit. We ran the group education sessions as we did before, but now they were via a video link. We phoned the patients every 2 weeks for a coaching consultation. We filmed all our educational videos on diet, physical activity. We put them on YouTube so the patients and their families could watch them whenever they liked. We continued to measure and manage their medical risk factors. But the most novel thing was we decided to give our patients Fitbit as wearable technology. And about 2/3 of our patients opted to receive Fitbit from us. So we provided this. They had to sign a contract to say they would use the device and stay with the program. We didn't want them selling it on eBay. But actually the Fitbit, I think, has been the most, the thing that's received the most positive feedback. Next slide. So this is the dashboard, which is used for team wellness. So it's a very rudimentary dashboard that Fitbit allowed us to use, but it still was very helpful. So the black dotted line is our first group who started using Fitbit, and you can see that they were quite inactive, and then their activity suddenly took off. And this was after their first virtual group session on physical activity delivered by the physiotherapist. But then you can see over the following few days, their activity slacked off again. But that was the weather in Northern Ireland that weekend. It was absolutely gale force winds. But this is an important point, because if your physical activity tails off in bad weather, then we have to find a way to counter that, because the weather is always bad in Northern Ireland. So this free living data is actually very informative for our physical activity team, who are monitoring our patients on this dashboard. And you can see their personalized message, and we were able to push these messages to the patients via the app. And this is one thing they really, really liked, these personalized messages coming to them every week from the physiotherapist. Next slide, please. We even were able to get food diaries via the Fitbit app, which we found very useful, particularly our dietitian. So this was our first patient on the virtual program, and he logged his food diary. And this meant when the dietitian went to phone him to do the coaching phone call, she didn't have to ask him how his diet was going. She could read it all, and then she could tweak his goals, trying to get him to adopt a more Mediterranean diet. Next slide. So this is our first patient on the virtual program. This was a dairyman. He was obese, sedentary, eating a lot of takeaways, and he had an acute coronary syndrome. And he was the first patient to go on the virtual program and had the assessment by the nurse, the dietitian, and the physical activity specialist. And you can see he logged his BMI every day for us, and you can see a nice steady reduction in his BMI. And on the right of the screen, you can see an increase in his active minutes. And this was somebody who previously did not exercise. By the end of the program, he had lost 13 kilos. He had undiagnosed diabetes. He hadn't realized he had diabetes. He had regressed it. He'd regressed his HbA1c to the normal range. His diet score went from very low at 4 to 10, which is high. He was achieving over an hour a day of active minutes, and his medical risk factors were well controlled. Next slide. So we've over 600 patients now have gone through the program. I'm not going to show you the results, but I was very nervous about analysing the results. But what we found, quite remarkably, was that our results were the same, if not better, than the face-to-face in terms of smoking cessation, diet, physical activity, blood pressure, cholesterol, and not just clinical outcomes, but patient-reported outcomes, anxiety, depression, and quality of life. So I'm a complete convert. We won't go back to the old program, and I think the future is a hybrid approach on offering patients a choice and tailored to their wishes. Thank you.
Susan, what an inspiring presentation. And I think it's addressed many of the concerns I'm now looking at in the chat. We're not saying this type of technology is going to completely replace what's out there at the moment, specialist nutrition advice, etc. This is all complementary. And I think you've shown very articulately, very beautifully, actually, how using this technology sort of weaved in appropriately can very much help patient outcomes. I would like to challenge you on one point, though. I've been to Northern Ireland on several occasions, and I can testify the weather isn't always that bad. It's pretty bad most of the time, but not always that bad. And the other thing is, I'm shocked. It always shocks me. It shouldn't do, but how can so many patients continue to smoke after suffering their heart attack? I mean, it's you would have thought if there was one life event that would really focus the mind for behavioural change, it would be something like a heart attack, but clearly not.
No.
But this type of technology really does help make a difference. And Aideen, do you mind if I just weave you in as well? There's quite a lot of concern about potentially Fitbit and the cost of Fitbit widening health inequalities. I mean, the entry-level Fitbit model, which has tremendous functionality, I mean, it's pretty affordable, isn't it? What sort of price range are we talking about?
Well, you're looking at about £70, 70, £80. But, you know, when you look at the cost of providing treatment, it's definitely something that needs to be looked at in terms of how people access the devices, because they can certainly save an awful lot more than that in terms of the treatment costs and the ongoing care that somebody needs if they don't identify the fact that they have diabetes or are prone to it or prone to some heart condition or detect the AFib. So there's a lot of reasons why you need to look at the, you know, what happens to you over a year if you are unwell, besides the pure not wanting to have any of these diseases and, you know, the pure personal discomfort is.
I mean, for me, it's just a no-brainer. I mean, the downstream costs of all of these complications, you know, it just make the upfront costs of the technology sort of so insignificant. And we've got to look at total health utilization costs when we start appraising these type of models. Susan, you painted a very positive picture of this technology. Any negatives? Did you get any patients who actually found it a hindrance more than a positive?
Yeah, that's a good question, because you get patients who are continuously checking, and you worry about anxious patients becoming dependent. But I have to say, I was surprised by how little of that we saw. So we did get one or two comments back, and the team had one patient in particular who kept phoning because they were anxious about what they were seeing on their Fitbit device. But as I said, less than I expected, not enough to put me off using it. You do worry about the digital divide and the better off or the more educated patient being more comfortable with the technology. Age, funnily enough, we found our patients who were younger took the Fitbit, but it was only 4 years in the difference, and we have 8-year-olds using it. So we found it was best not to prejudge, and we were surprised by the people who took it and the people who didn't take it.
No, fantastic. By the way, guys, we've had a few very specific questions on how to treat type 2 diabetes. That's a great question, but not for this presentation. The cardio ECG device, if you don't mind, I'll take that. I think there's, you know, clearly there's not just one solution that, you know, one size fits all, and there are other proprietary devices available that can record things like ECG. The one thing I would say, though, you know, having it all in one sort of device, you know, telling you the time, your activity, as well as being able to record the ECG, and also being able to connect to those sort of dashboards. You know, you've just got to bespoke it to what solution you want in your particular setting. Any other questions, guys? Have any of the other faculty members got a question for Susan before we move on? I thought that was a wonderful presentation, and of course, coming on the back of the direct study, and I mean, it's fantastic. We can actually tell patients we've got very good evidence that you can theoretically put your diabetes into remission. I wouldn't say you can cure diabetes. I mean, Jonathan will have a take on that. But you can certainly put diabetes in remission if you adopt some fairly aggressive lifestyle changes, and in particular weight loss. Okay. Oh, there was a really good question, actually. Aideen, have you heard of Freestyle Libre?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any plans to link Fitbit? Because Freestyle Libre, I have to say, has become you know, really big talking point, and having widespread access to that for, you know, for particular patients. Are there any plans to link Fitbit? It seems like a great idea to get continuous glucose monitoring for our patients with type 1 diabetes. Is that something in the pipeline?
So I can't so blood glucose tracking is certainly available in the US, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it on this side of the Atlantic sometime soon. But in terms of working with glucose monitors, there are a couple of companies that have actually set up clock faces So you can go to the app gallery on Fitbit.com and you'll find a number of companies have clock faces that allow you to monitor either your own or somebody you're caring for, their glucose. So they're worth checking out.
Great. Right, thank you. We're now going to move on to our other key specialist. This time we're going to get a slightly different perspective, a specialist in the world of metabolic medicine. We've got Dr. Jonathan Schofield, clinical lead of diabetes and endocrinology and metabolism at Manchester University NHS Foundation Trust. And I can guarantee you it always rains in Manchester. I've got much experience of that. Jonathan will focus on how wearables can enhance diabetes care pathways. And I do believe, Jonathan, you might also talk about the role of social prescribing in all of this.
Thank you. Yes, yeah, hopefully we'll cover that, and certainly any questions that come out of this. It is not always raining in Manchester, as you can see from the picture here.
That's a Photoshop.
Possibly. So, yeah, I think to start off, talk to many healthcare professionals about what we mean by diabetes wearable technology. We're actually talking about devices for insulin administration and glucose monitoring. And, you know, we've got a very specialized type 1 diabetes service here in Manchester Royal, 1,500 patients with type 1, and you know, we've got great outcomes for that population. But what we also have to recognize is that's 1,500 people, and there are many more people in the population that we serve here in Manchester who both have a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes or are at risk of developing type 2 diabetes. And you know, this is an opportunity for us to think about them. People who sort of read the newspapers will actually be aware of how grim the situation is here in Manchester, actually. Not only are our cardiovascular outcomes worsening, this new report, Build Back Fairer in Greater Manchester, which was from Michael Marmo's UCL Institute of Health Equity, provided some recommendations for Greater Manchester in terms of building back fairer from the pandemic we're sort of still knee-deep in. Made the headlines because actually we've seen that life expectancy here in Manchester has gone down over the last 5 years and a sharp decline over the last 18 months. So I think we all know, in terms of what we've seen in relation to COVID-19, the risk factors that we're all talking about here in terms of metabolic diseases, in terms of type 2 diabetes, many of those were also associated with a higher risk that we've seen. But so we do have, you know, there's been question about are we at risk of widening health inequality, but actually I'm just going to sort of talk a little bit about options we have to narrow that gap. So I say here in Manchester, we do have a higher than the national average prevalence of diabetes and higher than national average prevalence of people at high risk of developing type 2 diabetes. So lots of work being done across sort of the strategic sort of pathways. And a big part of that is Devo Mank, which I think many people will have heard of, and certainly I think is the future for how healthcare budgets should be managed. So just briefly, if people are not aware, so in Greater Manchester, we're in charge of it's about £6 billion worth of spending on health and social care in our 10 boroughs. The plan was to actually go beyond the ambitions in the NHS 5-year forward view by connecting all the things which create good health, from education to housing to work. So Manchester Health and Care Commissioning is working collaboratively with partners, including ourselves, on diabetes work programs to reduce inequalities in diabetes care and improve the outcomes for people of Manchester. Part of that is through social prescriptions, and through social prescriptions, which I'll just come on to now, we've actually got data to show we're tackling physical inactivity 3 times faster than the national average at the moment. So So people are not fully aware, social prescribing really enables GPs, nurses, other primary care professionals to refer people to a range of local non-clinical services to support health and well-being. And there's a growing body of evidence that social prescribing can lead to a range of positive health and well-being outcomes. Of course, we know that determining the cost, the resource implications, and really cost effectiveness of social prescribing is particularly difficult compared to the way that we usually measure outcomes from medical interventions. It's much more difficult than that, and really does require a longer term approach. And I think that's something which we have to sort of, when we start thinking about social prescribing, are things that can make a difference to our health outcomes over a longer period of time. This is where we sort of really do need to be thinking outside the box, and sort of wearable technology comes into the frame here. So, as I say, diabetes technology has traditionally sort of been dominated by devices for insulin administration, glucose monitoring, but there are real new opportunities here for the adoption of wearable, even mobile technologies as well. Yes, the clinical trial data to date is quite limited, but that's because we're really going to need longer follow-up for these patients. And when I say patients, I'm talking about people who've already got diagnosis, whether it be a cardiovascular disease, whether it be of type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease, obesity, but also people who are on their way to those diagnoses. And what we should be thinking about here is things that we can do to help people, those people at risk, because it's data that's been published by colleagues in Manchester over the last couple of months. For a start, nationally there's 60,000 people out there in the UK who we would have expected to have been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes since the first lockdown, and we haven't seen those patients yet. So either we've just had an unexpected reduction in the incidence of type 2 diabetes, or we've got people out there who have gone from being at risk to developing type 2 diabetes who we have no sight of because of the way that healthcare has been working for us over the last 12-18 months. So anything that gives our patients and the population, I think, empowerment to understand their health risk and take steps to stop being one of those people who might have a diagnosis that we've missed is massively important for us. And then, of course, going beyond that, we know that mobile wearable devices, as we've heard, generate enormous amount of data. It's possible to monitor many of the relevant parameters for patients with diabetes. And of course, what I think is very attractive, I heard Susan just mention about anxiety there. That's something we see with some of the diabetes technology that we have. But of course, with these wearable devices, the monitoring is continuous, passive, and much less obtrusive to many things that we've actually been asking our patients to do. And in terms of how we're delivering diabetes care now, certainly from my own centre, we're delivering about 50% of our appointments virtually. So any information that we can garner that helps us to make decisions and guide our patients into appropriate interventions, any extra information is just invaluable. And really understanding objectively what people are doing, I think, has tremendous scope. And even actually, I was delighted recently when I decided one of my patients needed a CT coronary angiogram because of their very high risk, and in order to not get myself in trouble with my radiologist, I asked the patient on the phone if they knew what their heart rate was, and they said, yes, I've got a Fitbit on, and I'm always in the 50s. And I knew that would keep my radiologist happy, and I wouldn't be getting a snotty email. So I think there's the things we've all talked about, but actually the potential here is great. So that's all I was really going to talk about. I'd like to take us back to the chat now. Got any questions I'll share with the rest of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, for another, I thought, very compelling presentation. I totally agree with you. I think for me, as a practicing frontline clinician, the biggest challenge that we're going to be faced with in the way we've sort of worked over the last 18 months, the way we've sort of reprioritized it, is the diagnostic challenge. I mean, perhaps, with wearable technology and remote monitoring and innovation, our existing patients with, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, I think we've actually managed pretty well. I mean, some of my virtual consults, I'm not sure I'm actually missing much beyond obviously the virtues of having human contact. But there's so many other parameters that we can look at virtually. But of course, it's the new diagnoses, isn't it? The new diagnosis of AF, the new diagnosis of diabetes. I think we are for a long time to come going to be addressing this sort of huge unmet need. And the other point I want to make, especially about diabetes, is I don't think many of us truly understand the true financial burden of diabetes-related healthcare. Particularly with the downstream cost of the complications, which are often catastrophic. There's not actually the direct cost of sort of diabetes and microvascular disease that kills the NHS. It's really the cost of the cardiovascular disease, the heart attacks, the strokes, the crippling heart failure, the dialysis, as well as the amputations. And I think that's what we've got to sort of look at as we move forwards into a more sort of sustainable health solution. I think Susan,
absolutely. 10% of the NHS budget is being spent on diabetes care. 10%. And how much? 90% of that is actually dealing with the complications.
Wow. Okay, so that's a huge disparity. I mean, that's probably a striking an example of how we've got to look at the value of interventions, not the cost of interventions, because the cost, that arbitrary cost, that's silo budgeting, isn't it? We've got to look at how that's going to impact on that future trajectory of the patient. And I guess we certainly need to gather more evidence base for the value of some of these type of technologies, but it does look very, very promising. Sadly, Susan seems to have sort of disappeared. Obviously, her technology didn't quite hold up in Northern Ireland, but we had some very nice comments about what she's done and how she's integrated technology. Maybe, Aideen, you can answer one of the questions was, can patients outside of Northern Ireland get access to this program initiative that she was talking about? Are there any other examples outside of what Susan's been doing?
Well, the program is Susan's. She's the brains and the connection behind it. So it's really something I'll pass that one on.
But it sounds like, if she's gathering that much evidence on impact, it sounds like something that we should be looking to.
Yeah, and it's something that I know she's very keen to share and to get other hubs up and running, because she really is passionate about it. She's seen excellent results, and she really is passionate to get it more widely used.
I just love seeing a cardiologist that isn't just interested in sticking a stent in a patient.
She's very, very proactive.
Yes, very, very
into the whole idea of prevention. And
what about Jonathan? Can you just reinforce the importance of early detection of metabolic disease like type 2 diabetes? Is there evidence? I mean, we hear a lot in primary care about this legacy window. Is that true? If we diagnose it early and absolutely hammer the prevention early and aggressively, you seem to be getting very long-term benefits from that. It's not something that you want to chase in the future, is it?
No, I mean, that's absolutely correct. There is a legacy effect. Obviously, what we want to try and do is, I'm not a big fan of the term pre-diabetes, but identify those people who are at risk, get people who've got, when their HbA1c is in the low 40s, and try and turn them away from the diagnosis altogether. But for sure, once you have a diagnosis, there's there's reams of evidence now that early aggressive management both delays time to insulin, but also delays the onset of all complications, actually.
And you seem to be reaping the rewards of that early aggression for sort of decades to come. Even if you relax that, after that initial period. I mean, that's something that we should all be aware of. And again, lifestyle. I mean, tell us about the direct study. How revolutionary was the direct study? This study that showed you can actually put diabetes in remission with aggressive sort of lifestyle and weight loss measures.
Yeah, so I think people not, you know, the direct study sort of, which was centered from Newcastle, was a very low calorie diet, around 800 calories a day, but with sort of full multidisciplinary team support as well, and showed tremendous outcomes, particularly in people in their sort of first 2 years really of diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, but putting diabetes, as we would say, into remission. But I think it's very telling when you talk to participants from the study. I said 800 calories a day is difficult because food is all around us. So it's difficult to achieve this just through dietary restriction. I think we have to be looking for sort of multimodal interventions from a lifestyle perspective. Certainly, you know, NHS England has seen the benefits of the direct study and is rolling it out in a sort of controlled way. So we've got funding for 1,000 patients across Manchester we're recruiting to at the moment. But that'd be very interesting because it's not quite the same sort of backup MDT support as there was in the original study. It's much more real world. So we'll have to see, do we achieve the same effects?
Fantastic. And I think we've had quite a few comments about how sort of wearables can really help, complement. Let's use the word complementary. We're not saying this is replacing, a whole lifestyle program, but it can really complement those necessary behavioral changes and facilitate change in individual patients. Just one comment actually from Dillis that I can actually relate to. I've just taken the type 2 diabetes risks test. I'm assuming that's the Diabetes UK risk scoring, and it has come back as an increased risk, despite the fact this person's a cycling instructor, eats well, doesn't smoke. Sorry. I mean, it just seems to churn out increased risks just purely on age. I guess this is just a lesson that we just got to use these things as a guide. And they're not an absolute, but like most things in life, I'm afraid, age is probably the biggest risk factor. So there's not really much you can do about that. What I like looking at is relative risk. Where are you compared to a healthy person of your age, sex, and ethnicity? And certainly in cardiovascular disease, we have lots of things like that. Look, I think I'm going to have to draw this to a close because I know Jonathan has to shoot off. Sadly, the time has flown by. What an absolute privilege to hear from our expert faculty. Thank you all for being real superstars, actually. You articulately and passionately reinforce the importance and impact of broad lifestyle behavioural changes to help address the huge burden of cardiometabolic disease in our patients, and really how wearable technology and connected solutions can help empower patients to make these changes and also provide remote patient monitoring solutions to enhance clinical pathways and improve efficiency. What an exciting new era we could embrace that could help add both years to life as well as a significant amount of life to those years. Thank you very much for your kind attention, and goodbye from me.
Thank you.